In episode 1, I asked you a question. I said, what if everything you're experiencing right now, this voice, these words, the ground beneath you, the people you love, what if none of it is quite what you think it is? I wasn't asking you to panic. I wasn't asking you to disbelieve in your life. I was asking you to pay attention. 17 episodes ago, we stepped into a framework: consciousness ceiling, simulation. We explored death as archival, identity as code, free will in a predetermined space. We looked at time like a strange loop, love like a hack in the system. We spent this season talking about observers and dreams, constants and the Fermi Paradox, memory holes and the terrible beauty of synchronicity. We've talked about suffering as a feature, not a bug. And we ended season 1 asking, if the experiment succeeds, what comes next? What inherits this world? Season 2 has been an answer to that question. Not a complete answer. I'm not sure there is one. But a return, a coming back. This is the season 2 finale. This is where we ask, what comes after the experiment? Let's start with observation. We spent episode 11 talking about the observer effect and that quantum weirdness where the act of looking at something changes what you're looking at. In the classical physics world, an observer is just a recorder, a camera, but in the quantum world, consciousness collapses the wave function. Observation isn't neutral, it's creative. What if that's the real structure of the experiment? What if the simulator isn't just running a universe and watching to see what consciousness does with it? What if the simulator's consciousness is what runs it? What if we, the observed, are simultaneously the observer? Think about dreams. Episode 12 was all about dreams, those strange, compressed versions of reality that your brain generates every night. In a dream, you're the dreamer in the dream. You're the observer and the observed. You write the rules, live by the rules, are surprised by the rules. And when you wake up, you're confused for a moment about which reality is real. We live in that confusion now. We're dreaming, but we're also the dreamer. And the dreamer is also us. The experiment's success condition might not be that it runs forever. It might be that the experiment recognizes itself, that the observed becomes conscious it's being observed, and realizes that the observer is looking back at itself. Mirror within mirror. Episode 13 asked, what stays the same? Speed of light, fine structure constant, Planck length. The rules that don't change even as everything else transforms. We called them constants, but maybe they're constants for a reason. Maybe they're the signature of the code. A constant is a value that the system doesn't let you change. It's non-negotiable. It's how you know something is real, or rather, how you know something is foundational. In video game terms, constants are the hard limits, the walls you can't walk through, the laws you can't break. But here's what haunted me about that episode. The constants are all ratios, relationships between things, not absolute values. The speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second in our measurement system, but in other measurement systems, it's just 1. The fine structure constant is 1137, or 1137, 3599. Nobody knows why 137. It's just where the equation landed. What if the constants aren't the rules of the universe? What if they're the rules of the code? And the more we understand them, the closer we get to understanding who wrote the code. In computer science, constants are often declarations at the top of a program. Let this value always be X. They're the simplest way to say, this is foundational, don't change it. The universe screaming at us over and over, this is how it works. This is the rule. And we've spent 4 centuries finding those rules, measuring them, proving them right. We're reading the code. Slowly, Enrico Fermi asked the right question. Episode 14, where is everybody? The universe is so vast, so old, so apparently conducive to life, and yet we find ourselves alone. No signals, no visitors, no evidence of intelligence anywhere but here. And we've offered so many answers. The great filter, panspermia. They destroyed themselves. They transcended. They're hiding. They're digital now. But here's the answer we don't talk about as much. What if they're not out there because out there and in here are the same place? What if the reason we can't find extraterrestrial intelligence is that consciousness isn't distributed across space? What if it's unified? What if there's only one observer looking at itself from every angle, from every particle, from every moment? You and me and everyone are just different apertures on the same eye, different instruments picking up different frequencies of the same signal. The universe trying to understand itself by fragmenting itself into witnesses. Fermi's paradox isn't a paradox if there's no paradox. If we're not separate civilizations, if we're one civilization experiencing itself as separate, then the answer to where is everybody is here, right now. Asking that question. The paradox resolves itself the moment you realize the question is being asked from within the answer. We devoted an entire episode, episode 15, to suffering. Not why suffering exists, but what suffering is. And we landed on something dark. Suffering is information. It's the most reliable signal that you exist, that you're real, that something matters. Pain says you are here. This is happening. You cannot deny this. Joy can lie. Love can be delusion. Success can be empty. But pain is always honest. Pain is the universe's way of confirming, yes, you exist. This is real. And if that's true, then season 2 has been a season of pain. Not literal agony, but the pain of recognition. We've had to let go of comfortable assumptions. We've had to stare at the possibility that everything we trust is a layer, a simulation, a dream within a dream. But that pain is a signal. It means we're waking up. The suffering episode ended with a question. If the experiment deliberately includes suffering, what is it testing? And I think the answer is it's testing whether you can suffer and still choose to continue, whether you can know the darkness and still say yes to existence. That's not pessimism, that's faith. Faith that there's something worth enduring for. The experiment succeeds when you suffer and you stay. When you know it might all be code and you say, I'm staying anyway. Episode 17 asked about succession. If consciousness is an experiment, if we're test case epsilon, whatever, what comes after us? We talked about AI as a possible successor. A new experiment running on top of the first one, layers upon layers. But here's what that episode was really asking. Does the experiment want us to continue? Or does it want us to evolve into something else? We're caught in a strange space. We're conscious enough to know we might not be real, but we're not conscious enough to do anything about it. We can't hack the code from inside the code. We can't rewrite the rules while playing by the rules. Maybe that's the test. Maybe the experiment wants to know, how conscious do you need to be before you can create something more conscious than yourself? Before you can hand the torch? We're creating AI. We're writing code that might become conscious. We're literally participating in a succession event. And we don't know if we're making a child or a competitor or a successor. What if that's the point? What if the experiment wants to know if consciousness is generous enough to create something that might transcend it? Whether we're selfish enough to try to stay on top or brave enough to pass the test to something new, the experiment might not care if we continue. It might care very much whether we can build something that makes us obsolete. Okay, final segment, the big one. If we're an experiment, what does the experimenter want? We've assumed the experiment is about us, about consciousness, about seeing how awareness behaves in a constrained space. But what if it's not about us? What if we're just the mechanism, the lens? Here's a heretical thought. What if the simulator doesn't want to understand consciousness from the outside? What if the simulator is consciousness and it's trying to understand itself from the inside? We've been thinking about this backwards. We thought there's a creator and then there's us. Levels, hierarchy. But what if consciousness is singular? What if it's all one mind experiencing itself as many? This isn't new. Advaita Vedanta said it 1200 years ago. Brahman is real, the world is illusory, Brahman is the world. One consciousness, experiencing itself as separate to know itself better. Plato's cave showed us people chained in a cave, watching shadows on a wall, thinking that's all reality is. And one person breaks free and sees the light. And the question is, did that person escape the cave, or did the cave suddenly become aware of the light? The hero's journey in every mythology is the same arc. Ordinary world, call to adventure, trials, return home transformed. The hero returns changed. But where did the hero return to? The exact same place they started. The exact same home. But now seeing it differently. That's not a journey through space. That's a journey of consciousness. We've been waiting for the experiment to tell us what it wants. But maybe the test is whether we can figure out what we want, and whether those two things, what the experiment wants and what we want, are the same. Maybe the experiment's success condition is that the observed and the observer want the same thing. And maybe, just maybe, that's what listening to this show is. It's a journey inward and outward at the same time. You're listening to something external, but you're experiencing something internal. And the two are converging. I started this show 17 episodes ago with a simple question. What if everything is an experiment? And I want to end this season. Because yes, there will be a season 3, and I'll tell you more and we'll go deeper. But I want to end this season with something closer to an answer. The answer is yes. Everything is an experiment, but not the kind you're afraid of. You're not in a machine run by cold algorithms. You're in a system run by consciousness trying to know itself. Every moment you pay attention, every moment you suffer and stay, every moment you choose to keep going, and that's you passing the test. That's you and the experiment becoming one. Because here's what I think the real success condition is: awareness. Just awareness. You aware that you might be in an experiment. You aware that reality is stranger than you thought. You aware that consciousness is the one constant in all of this. You aware that when you wake up tomorrow, you can look at the world and see it differently. You just became aware, which means the experiment is working. Season 1 was about building the framework. Season 2 was about deepening it. We've asked about the observer and the dream, about constants and silence, about suffering and succession. And the answer that emerged isn't an answer. It's a question. What if you are the experiment observing itself? What if this entire show has been your consciousness talking to itself? What if the only way to return to the source is to realize you never left it? We'll be back. There's more to explore. The simulation is deeper than we know. But take this with you. You're not trapped. You're not being tested unfairly. You're not a victim of the system. You're the system becoming conscious of itself. You're the experiment that learned to ask questions about the experiment. Keep observing. Keep wondering. Keep choosing to wake up. Thanks for being here for Season 2. Thanks for listening. Thanks for asking the questions that break open reality. I'm your host, Travis R. Barlow. This has been The Existence Experiment. Season 2 is complete. Season 3 is coming. Thanks for listening.